My name is Joe Woodham from Torii. Welcome to our vlog series, All Things Design. Today I'm joined by UniSuper's Head of Digital and Customer Experience, Brendan Donoghue. Brendan has built some of the largest design teams in Australia, including the likes of Telstra, NAB, and currently UniSuper. Welcome, Brendan. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you, Joe?
Incredibly well, thank you. I want to jump straight into it. My first question is, you're not traditionally, your background isn't design. How did you move into design?
It's not traditionally design. I had started, when I'd first left school, I'd worked as a sysadmin for a small telco company. And so we're talking about sort of 95, 96. And over 10 years, really built that into a career in and around digital delivery or IT delivery. During that time, you know, we were doing a lot of innovative things. We were on site doing designs with the people that we were building software for. We were getting people involved who we were building software for and testing it. And at the time, it was quite, we were quite off center when we compared ourselves to kind of our industry peers who were very focused on get the documentation signed and make sure that the BRDs are correct and then move on formally, whereas we wanted to be quite really involved with our end users. And at the time, I didn't understand that that was actually a thing, that there was an industry that was starting to spin up. And when I was 27, I went and studied law and studied law for 3 years, and pretty much the entire time was a frustrated designer. And I left law school in my 30s or early 30s, at 30, and pretty much then kicked off a career in the design industry. You know, I very quickly wound up at Optus. At Optus, I was leading a team that was looking at, you know, our billing systems and the improvements we could be making there. I went across to Telstra, moving from Sydney down to Melbourne, and worked for the billing and credit area, and in that space started to actually build human-centered design capability. And it was a really radical change for these organizations as we started to actually build human-centered capability, as we started to embrace user testing. I had the opportunity to go and work for Telstra's design practice and then actually look after their entire testing program. So everything that we built at Telstra before we actually launched it, we actually ran it through user testing so we could have sort of predictive impact on NPS. And that was a massive program. You know, we were testing more than 100 things a year through really intensive user testing programs. Cool. And then went across to NAB and started at NAB. I think there are about 5 or 6 of us in the UX team, and it's now built into one of Australia's largest teams.
Yeah, they're huge now.
It's massive. It's massive.
Telstra is the biggest now, and now you've got NAB who's rivaling close behind.
Yeah, and they all started from very small little groups of people who genuinely wanted to make a difference at these big organizations. And people like me, I guess, who came in and just wanted to shake things up, who wanted to do things a little differently. And, you know, when I arrived at Telstra, I'd been brought in to actually look at their billing and credit program. My remit was to make people happy to get a Telstra bill, which was a pretty big challenge at the time. And, you know, we couldn't do it just based on gut feel. We really needed to understand what our users were thinking and what they were going through in that moment of opening the bill and their sales experience. And so really bringing those customer insights into what we were doing in our work and what was happening more broadly in billing and credit was pretty revolutionary. But now seems almost a bit passé, right? Because now you're always looking at user feedback. You're always looking at what were the users telling us. I remember when I was at Optus, you know, we did a piece of work and we wanted to find out what users were thinking. So we started calling them up. We got into trouble because we hadn't been properly trained and accredited to actually be initiating customer contact, which now, like I said, you know, almost seems a little off center because now you're actively encouraging people to talk to users constantly and find out what's going on. Whereas back then it was seen as only something that could be done through call centers and absolutely shouldn't be happening anywhere else.
Wow. Imagine a call center doing your user research as opposed to designers. Yeah, very different outcome.
Very, very different outcome.
So what inspired your move into leadership? Obviously, you've found design without knowing you're finding design and moved into it. What's inspired you to start growing and leading teams?
I almost went a bit backwards on this. So I was a leader before I was a designer. So my capability and my strength was always around leadership. But the thing that I realized as I was making this transition and embracing design properly, sort of about 10 years ago, was that my capability was always going to be in creating spaces where great design could thrive. That I wasn't going to be the best service designer or UX designer. That my strength was going to be in being able to translate the value of design for the wider organization, to build coalitions of the willing and support for design programs, and really to be the one comfortable to take risks, to put my neck on the line so that we could get approval or endorsement or funding to do a particular piece of work. I remember where I was at Optus, we had identified an opportunity to improve what we called the return mail process. And, the team had worked out, we were getting all of this mail returned back to Optus, and we weren't doing anything with it. We would throw it in the bin because these weren't Optus customers, people who had moved from one address to another and the old address was still getting the mail. And so we had a solution. We'd worked out what to do, but no one would support it because there wasn't any value for Optus customers in it. So I asked the mail house to start sending all the boxes of returned mail to my desk. And after sort of a week or so, there's almost this little fort that's built up behind my desk. And some of these envelopes that have really terrible stuff written on them, because I'd be like, Optus, you've been sending me this for a year. Stop sending this, and swear words and what have you. And we had a director walk past the desk one day who started to pick stuff up and was like, Brendan, what is this? I said, well, this is all the returned mail. We could actually be fixing this, but we don't want to. He said, how much money do you need? And I told him, and he said, right, I'll give you the funding instantly. Go and get going on fixing it. So I saw that was kind of my role as the agitator within the organisation. That could have ended quite badly for me, and they could be saying, why don't you just stick to the job we've given you as opposed to constantly trying to change everything. But I think that's what organisations need, is someone who's quite comfortable not being happy with where things are and continually wanting to push them forward.
Well, from a lot of conversations that I've had, stakeholder management is one of the hardest parts of design leadership, is really trying to get the organisation to understand why they're doing certain things. So as a leader, it's probably one of your most important traits. Have you ever had pushback from the designers below you, or have they always been very comfortable because you've been able to get the right results?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think one of the challenges we've got as designers is that I think for the past couple of years, there's been a realization in the industry that if we just wait, change won't happen. So I remember, the Harvard Business Review published an article that design thinking's time has arrived, something similar in name. And it was our moment, right? We were going to be embraced by organization, the birth of design thinking. Suddenly our time was coming. But what happened was organizations didn't change around us. They didn't embrace and deliver, human-centered outcomes the way that we thought they would. Instead, what we started to see was design was overlooked. It was de-scoped. Customer outcomes were deprioritized so that stuff could still be delivered on time or on budget. So I think the thing that we've got to embrace as designers is to back ourselves and believe in what we're doing, and to constantly push the organization forward. I like to tell my team, if you don't believe in what you do, who else will? So I guess the answer to your question, have people under me ever felt a little uncomfortable? It's probably in those moments where I'm saying, you've got to go, you've got to push other people in the organization to embrace the thing that you're doing, because it's the only way that will drive those changes forward. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable for designers. As an industry, there are a lot of people who are introverted, who are uncomfortable in actively presenting and stakeholder management. There's a strong focus on observation and insights. And it's almost like there's another skill that we're not teaching designers. They've got to go and develop, which is that ability to influence, that ability to display confidence, and that ability to shape thought about what they do, as opposed to, just be ready if someone happens to ask us to help.
I agree. especially in large complex environments, I think stakeholder management is a real key piece. When anyone comes to us for designers, they really push back on, we need someone that's going to be able to speak to stakeholders and really sway decisions or actually make impacts. Otherwise, it's just you're doing design. It's half the puzzle that you're missing. But positive feedback, I have actually heard from people that have worked below you and they love working below you. So obviously leadership is on the right track.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Just on that, I really like to think that the design that we're doing isn't for academic or artistic endeavor. The design that we do is done so that we can change the experiences that we deliver to our customers. And one of the things that I talk to my designers about when we're actually setting their annual KRAs or KPIs or OKRs or whatever you call them, but is that you don't get credit for things we don't deliver. So you can have the best idea, but if we don't deliver it, we don't put it in our members' hands or our customers' hands, then you don't get credit for it at the end of the year. And for some people, that's quite shocking because you say, no, hang on a second, I sit in this box and I can do amazing work within this box. Why are you telling me that it actually depends on what happens with the product owner or with the project manager or the funding at the end of the line? And my response to that is, this is ultimately what we are needed to be doing for organizations, is driving that proactive change. So there are capabilities and skills which we've clearly developed around being able to generate the strong insights. But there's an area of our skill set which is underdeveloped, and I touched on it before. It's that building influence. You have to actually build that strength out to take others inside the organization on the journey to be able to influence them so that they see the value in what you've created, so that we can then build it and deliver it to our members. Because otherwise we have these amazing ideas, but we don't do anything with them. And not only do we miss the opportunity to improve the experience for customers, but ultimately I think we do a disservice to our industry, because then these big organizations start looking at our design teams and say, gosh, I'm spending a lot of money there. What have we delivered? If they come down, oh, we had all these great ideas, but we didn't do anything with them. Oh, okay, great. So I could let you go and it would change nothing about what we're delivering. Is that what you're telling me? So
I was just going to ask on that, like it's a really good, an interesting point for anyone coming up in design. So how do you sharpen the skill set around really selling your ideas or stakeholder management? Like, how do you improve on that? It's a difficult one unless you're in the situation.
I think that influence is kind of built around 3 or 4 key capabilities. I think that you've got to be able to, number one, show competency or strong capability in design practice. At your core, you're a designer, so you have to be brilliant at the thing that you do, or confident in the thing that you do, and constantly keep a focus on improving that skill. But then there are things that you need to be looking at, like, as a leader, you need to have a strong focus on people leadership. You actually need to be building out the strength around uplifting those who sit under you, so that you're not just focused on design excellence, but also excellence within the organization and how they're performing. But then more broadly, I think you need to be focusing on kind of characteristics that I've previously defined as like entrepreneurial behaviors. You've got to feel comfortable networking. You've got to feel comfortable building up a support network within the organization. You have to understand that once you get into these big organizations, like it or not, they are large political organizations. And so it's a real strength to be able to understand how to move through these networks, how to understand and play the politics. And I'm not talking about gossip or something like that, but actually understanding that these are large, complex systems that have been designed in one way or another by the people who actually sit within them. So as a designer, eat your own cake and actually understand, how do you influence within these large, complex networks? So often we sit and we focus just on the activity that we're doing, but not actually on the system that we sit within. So number one, focus on building up your capability, focus on people leadership, focus on the network that you sit within, but also just build up that strength of being able to confidently talk about the thing that you do. to be able to present. And not everyone's going to feel comfortable getting on stage. I understand that, but at least understanding where you can shine in being able to showcase the work that you're doing. So I think if you kind of bring all of those together, that gives you the opportunity to build influence as opposed to just being a great designer. One of the things that I suggest to designers who are looking to take that next step within their career is to get a mentor, but get a mentor outside of design. Because if you're getting a mentor outside of design, they're going to have to understand what it is that you do, and that will help you sharpen that skill so you can translate the value of what you do into value that the organization understands. If you don't know what your boss's scorecard says or what the company scorecard says, how can you ever hope to be able to showcase, well, we found this great thing, this great insight, we think we should build an app or a process to deliver this because it will deliver this value that you're looking for in your scorecard. Often designers fall into the trap of talking about their work in kind of sentiment metrics. It'll lift NPS, it'll increase or decrease complaints. But being able to quantify that in something that translates for the business is incredibly powerful. It'll increase NPS, which means that it will increase retention. It will increase sales. It will decrease credits associated with calls to the call center. Okay, hang on. Now I understand the value, says the business. And this is that part as designers. You've got to feel comfortable in your own skin as a designer that your design can deliver that benefit, but you've also got to embrace the risk a little bit and confidently tell the business that, we can deliver this value. We can actually realize this outcome and back yourself in.
It's just really good advice for anyone coming through. Kind of really outlines that extra responsibility that designer should be focusing on. It's not just being good at design, it's actually managing the whole process. It's fantastic. Thanks for that. You touched on mentorship and getting a mentor outside of the industry specifically. Like, I'm big on trying to surround myself with people that can actually help me because they've been there and done that. What's someone that you've worked with as a mentor and got advice from that's really stuck with you throughout your career as a leadership and helped shape you as a leader?
So probably the one who's helped me the most in the past couple of years is a guy called Leon Doyle. So Leon Doyle is now the Chief Experience Officer over at Deloitte. And it's been amazing over my career catching up with Leon a couple of times just at key moments. A mentor doesn't have to be someone that you're connecting with every week or every couple of weeks. It could even be someone you're connecting with every year, as long as their advice is really going to be something that you listen to and you'll take on. Leon was the individual before we started recording who challenged me around, you want to take that next step when I was looking at leaving the bank. Think about the job that you want to go to. And he asked me, Brendan, what's the job you want? And I said, Leon, I want to be a head of design and I want to be something else. And he said, don't tell me jobs. I don't want to know jobs. I asked you, what do you want to be doing? I want you to think about what it is that you're doing day to day, what it is that your role's delivering for the organisation, what type of organisation you're working within. And I said, okay, well, I want to be working at somewhere that's doing good. So I want to be working at an organisation that's in renewable energy or an organisation like Superannuation, because these are products, when you're engaging with them, they're doing good for people. I want to be at an organisation that has capacity to be able to invest in improving the customer experience, probably doesn't have a CX team yet, so there's an opportunity for me to build my own. And that's really happy and excited about going on the customer journey. He said, okay, now write me a CV for that. And I poked fun at him. I said, what, this magical organisation that meets all of these criteria is out there looking for a designer? I don't think so, but I humoured him. And so I wrote out this CV and I really focused on getting it right. And sure enough, within a couple of weeks, UniSuper was advertising for a head of design and ticked, honestly, every single box. And so I applied, but I was so ready to go through that process that I then went through that process and was successful. It was something like 205 other candidates that actually applied for the role, and I was successful. Yeah.
How is that many people for that level role in Melbourne?
I have no idea. It was an interesting experience for me when they told me just before I started, because my imposter complex went all the way to 11. And I was like, oh my God, they've made a mistake hiring me. They don't realize that I don't know what I'm talking about. But honestly, that advice was worth its weight in gold. And that's the sort of thing you should be looking for from a mentor. None of that advice was about design practice. None of that advice was in relation to the practice of design, but it was about me as a design leader and what I needed to be doing to take my career to the next level. And I'll be honest, I've caught up with Leon a couple of times since and sort of talked about the next step, and equally has been as challenged. Okay, well, hang on, I'm not hearing enough from you about, data. I'm not hearing enough from you about this. Are you actually working on that, or are you just pretending that that's the next role you want to go to? Oh, okay, hang on, I've got to go away and do better.
Interesting. Just this might be a topical question. Obviously, superannuation, it's always been a little bit behind the times from an outside perspective. Has it been easy to influence and really push through with CX and really understanding your users and creating change?
I work at an organisation that is going through the change. So UniSuper's just opened its door to the general public. So up until this point, UniSuper's been a closed organisation or one that you had to be a member of a university to actually to join. So I was at a really interesting point. Mostly people join organisations and they want you to continue the thing that they're doing. When I joined UniSuper, there was a real sense of we're going to do this thing in the future and we need to get ready. So it's been a really exciting process actually joining and then going through the process of getting them ready to open and understanding that previously you had this captive market coming to you and now we're going to be competing with the wider industry. So it's been amazing to bring them through the journey and understand what are the insights we need to be gathering, what are the experiences we need to be building. How do we actually really focus on digitally onboarding as opposed to waiting for people to just join automatically? But I'll answer your question. It hasn't been easy, right? So even though organisations might be intent on doing something, at the end of the day, organisations are a collective of people. And people are always at different spaces on the change curve, right, or the change journey. So I've had some people who've loved working with me and I've had other people who have been more of a challenge. And that's not just UniSuper, that's my entire career. I think the skill is to really focus on those who don't believe and turn them around. Often your biggest critics become your biggest supporters. I've known that from Telstra, the bank, and at UniSuper, focusing on those relationships that are difficult. When those people are turned around, that's when you're actually really doing good within the company that you're in. And that's when you can really start to deliver meaningful change.
Very good advice. You've obviously built a lot of design teams and hired a lot of people over the years. What sort of skills and attributes do you look for when you're looking at a designer to bring on? What do you think makes a good designer?
I think passion makes a good designer. We've built a unique process at UniSuper when we're hiring. So I had this unique challenge when I actually started. I'd come from Optus, Telstra, and the National Australia Bank, and I had this massive blind spot to hiring that I didn't actually know I had. Because when I was at these organisations, we used to get all these people applying. And so we thought, well, people just want to be designers. But actually what I realised was people wanted to be designers at well-known organisations. So when I started at UniSuper, the thing that's amazing about UniSuper is the culture. And no one knew of UniSuper. Gosh, I didn't know about UniSuper when I started there, when I'd applied there. I'd like to say it's the best super fund you've never heard of. But what we started to do was we realised that people weren't excited about working at the organisation. So we had to try and showcase our culture as quickly as possible during the interview process, because interviews are a two-way street. So the first round of interview at UniSuper is always a very quick skills assessment. I'll be talking to you, the hiring manager will be talking to you, and just understanding, can you do the thing that we want you to do? The next interview, though, is actually just team members. And so there's no leadership in these sessions. It's literally just team members. And it's a completely unstructured discussion. You can come in and ask anything that you'd like to know, and they are instructed to answer you completely honestly. Tell you about the challenges they have, tell you about the culture that they work in, tell you about the people that they work alongside. Almost to a person, we have people come out of that interview champing at the bit to come and work at UniSuper because they're like, oh my gosh, the culture is absolutely amazing. These people that I just met with sound phenomenal. I want to come and work here. I really want to be a part of this organisation. And the last thing that we actually do is we give them a design challenge. And it's not a big one, and it's nothing to do with superannuation. So there's no ethical concern in relation to, would we use the work? And it's really just a way for individuals to showcase the thing that they're great at. Often what we have is people will take something they've done before and they kind of repurpose it, but they can talk us through their thinking, because we just want to know, what is your approach to design? And we have hired people whose final outcome hasn't been great, but you can really see the thinking and the approach that they've done in it. And we've also not hired people whose outcome has been perfect, but who have been combative or have been not very clear in how they've actually arrived at the outcome. They've just jumped to something as opposed to actually showing the value of, say, research. So what's the thing that we're looking for the most? We're looking for passion, and we're also looking for self-awareness as a designer. What do you think you're good at? What do you think you're challenged by? One of the most interesting questions I ever ask every interview is, if you went back over your last 2 years, what would you change? And it's always a red flag for me when someone says, oh, nothing, not much. I think everything's perfect. If you ask me what I'd change about last week, I'll have 10 things. The last 2 years, my gosh, we should have done this better. We should have done this better, because, great design is constantly reflecting and constantly being self-critical and looking for opportunities to improve.
Yeah, I think that's relevant to any industry. Nothing's ever perfect. There's always new ways of doing things that's it's going to get a better result. That's interesting. Wow, you obviously built some pretty big teams. So should we be watching this space at UniSuper? Is it going to be one of the next biggest design teams in Melbourne?
No, it's not. And can I just say, it's interesting that we talk about the size of the design team. I think one of the things that I was challenged by when I was at NAB was that design felt that it was becoming commoditized. And I think that was one of my biggest takeaways when I left NAB, was that we had been so successful in selling the concept of design that people saw it as critical to their success. But what we hadn't done well was selling how it needed to be used. So we'd sold the concept, and so you had journey leaders or product owners or project managers saying, I need UX designers, get me UX designers, I need 3 on the project, and they'd turn up and they'd have them doing PowerPoint packs, or they'd have them printing out stuff to put on walls for showcases that weren't related to the practice of design, but they just saw them as critical. That project over there had a great outcome, they had designers, I need designers. So at UniSuper, I've actually gone quite the opposite, and I've really held back on trying to grow the team too much. Today I have the pleasure of looking after not only design, but also digital. So we're quite a unique organization where I have the digital product owners also reporting to me. Traditionally they sit in different parts of the business and fight. We're quite lucky. So we've got research, the UX, the UI, and then the actual product ownership and delivery components all sitting together. And that team's today only 17 people. So it's not as massive as your NABs or anything else, but we're also only an organisation of about 1,000 people. And I don't want us to get too much bigger. Obviously, as we build additional capability, we'll need to look at that. But I want us to get better. And that's the thing where I honestly can say without a shadow of a doubt, this is the most talented team that I've ever led. But it's not the biggest. And it's the most talented because what we've really, really focused on now is uplifting our standard. Really adopting that Amazon mantra of every time you hire someone, are you lifting the average of the team?
I like it. The design, like you've been in the space for a while, it's come a long way in the last few years, and even COVID's really accelerated it once again. Is there any emerging trends that you're keeping an eye on in the space at the moment, or that you're excited by?
I think one trend, like this is an interesting question. I think one trend that I'm really excited by is actually the embrace of inclusive design. I'm genuinely loving it. Organisations right across the country are really starting to embrace better terminology around gender, decoupling of salutations from gender, allowing people to have preferred names or actually more inclusive names that are more responsive to, say, non-Anglo backgrounds, language which is more inclusive to those who are less abled, physical designs that work for people of all abilities. And that's actually the thing that I'm genuinely loving, this move away from a white Anglo standard background where everyone has exactly the same ability and everyone is exactly the same. And it's a really wonderful place to be as a designer, because it's actually about, we're really getting to the heart of what we do as designers, which is looking after the people who are most vulnerable. So that's the bit I'm really excited about. It's no longer us shouting into the wind, you've got to be including these people, you've got to be including these people, and being ignored. What we're seeing is organisations embrace this. Now, they're doing it for business reasons. There's a competitive advantage potentially, or they're worried about negative social media pressure, but it doesn't matter, because what we're actually getting to do is look after those that we want to look after. So that's the thing that genuinely excites me at the moment.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, we one of my team did a video on accessibility, and the amount of people that impacts if you're not thinking about it. It's like 1 in 5, I think it was. Yep. It's incredible to look at the stats when you haven't thought about it before. So to be able to impact that from a design perspective on any organisation must be pretty powerful.
We had a, as a design leader, if you're a design leader and you're listening to this, go and understand what it is really like to use your products and services if you don't have, the full set of abilities that you might have. We took the team when I was at NAB Down Division Australia and actually went through what it would be like to use our systems. If you were blind, if you were needing to use a screen reader, and the outcomes were terrible. And it was a really amazing moment as we sat there as a design team, and someone who was actually blind was like, let me take you through the website. And they got stuck on the homepage because we'd not tagged everything properly. It went back into a loop. Academically, you could understand when things went wrong. You could maybe read a report and you could discuss whether or not you should do it. But sitting there and actually having to face the person who's like, I cannot use your corporate website because of the way that you have designed it, and actually then needing to justify whether or not it's a good decision, all of those conversations go out the window, right? And it makes the impact real for the decisions that you're making. So get that real data, get that qualitative insight into the team wherever you can, because that's what will really drive the change.
What a powerful way to understand what works and what doesn't work. You should get that with any user experience team trying to look at accessibility. It's like, how do you impact these, like your decisions? It's like sit them down with someone that's actually having trouble. That is so cool. Brendan, I can't thank you enough for today. It's been amazing. It's been some incredible takeaways and insights for anyone coming up in either leadership or design. So thank you very much. If anyone's looking to reach out and get in touch, what's the best way? Is it via LinkedIn?
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. Always happy to connect. And once we're out of lockdown, always happy to have a coffee and talk about the industry.
One day. Wow, I'll have to dig up that information on superannuation for you. But once again, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.